the Yamins, and therefore that will cause a lot of problems. The short-term solution is not for ZESCO to actually increase that tariff. It's for them perhaps maintain it, even try to reduce it, so that they can woo a lot of people coming in order to become users of the electricity. They must work. They must work on the masses rather than working on a small diminishing community which has always been paying for their electricity. And therefore I would turn the question to them and say, what have you done to electrify our country so that you can increase your capacity, at the same time increase the population who want the energy from you in order for you to generate that funding? That is a question we should be asking them. If they've done a lot and they've electrified the whole country, then we can say we are in the wrong, then we have to look at other solutions. But at the moment, the ball is in their court, it's not on the single citizen of Zambia, and therefore they must look at that strategy and move on.
It's silence on foreign policy.
Yes. Foreign policy. And your foreign policy, which you've asked about, is not the entirety, but you are interested mainly on how I look at it in terms of Zambia putting itself forward for what we call the United States of Africa. First of all, I would like to start from the history. If we look at Kwame Nkrumah, at the beginning of many of the things which have been happening in Africa, the first country to obtain independence in what we call English-speaking nations, he had that vision too. A lot of people after him have come in and out looking at that vision to see if it will work for Africa. At the moment, as I see it, the problem is extremely difficult to work for Africa. I'll tell you why. We need, first of all, to make every country supportive and end tribalism, which is just at the doorstep. If we cannot do that, how can you go into another nation and bring those nations together? If at home, you cannot actually make sure that everybody respect each other, despite of where they come from, despite of greed, despite of anything which they do. And that's where we must start from. Until we satisfy that condition, like many of our friends here have done to satisfy, for example, the EU, by bringing their people together where they live, by bringing their people to understand that this is our future, by bringing their people to live together in harmony without the tribalism which is so strife in many different African countries. It will be difficult to actually go on and say we want a united Africa. Until that time comes, then we'll be able to be talking about it as we have been talking about it since Kwame Nkrumah, but not without implementation. And that is the most important thing, which we have to understand, that education of our people, making sure that we end. If we are Zambians, we talk of one Zambia, one nation, not all because you come from Mongo or whatever, I cannot speak to you, I cannot promote you and so on. That is not required. We need now to look at it as one Zambia, one nation, in order to move ourselves out of poverty and later go on foreign policy to engage ourselves into the formation of the African, Union of the African Union.
The Zimbabwean issue.
Yes, oh yeah, the Zimbabwean issue. Let me just say that was the last point. The Zimbabwean issue, at the beginning, when I communicated with different ministries, with different people in Zambia, I thought was a little bit handled very poorly by many African countries. And I'll tell you why it was handled very poorly by many African countries. Every country in Africa who claimed to be a democratic country were supposed to say that elections have been held and the winner of those elections, although we will never know who the winner was, is to set back and give a dignity to the people of Zimbabwe. And by us supporting that democracy, which was dwindling at one point or another, is something whereby we came to regret. And we came to regret because the world saw us that we could not solve our own issues, which are just around the corner. And I liked the stance the late President Levi Mwanawasa took, when he was telling Robert Mugabe to come and sit and negotiate in order to tell us who has won the elections. But he was dilly-dallying all over the place. And Levi Mwanawasa was at the point to tell him, I said, we want to know the people of SADC. At that particular time, he was the SADC chairman, and therefore he wanted to know the truth of exactly where they stood. And sadness prevailed, of course, and what happened, we all know now that they instigated new elections, and those new elections were not held due to the fact that the opposition were adamant that they had won the election, and the people in power were also adamant that they had won the election. So a compromise had to be made. And within that compromise, the negotiations which were taken forward in terms of the political ground were also a very good tool to bring this to an end. But all the same, we missed another chance at that particular time, and that case was protracted so much that in the end, it became sort of passing the ball to this, passing the ball to there. We had South Africa perhaps was a great disappointment in my own understanding. Yeah. South Africa would have shown leadership. They would have shown leadership because in SADC they're the most powerful. Yeah. And they did not show that leadership. We put in the ANC president, and that president at that particular time of South Africa, Mbeki, to go and use his leverage in order to deliver the peace which we wanted for Zimbabwe, because everybody at that particular time was extremely exhausted with the way Zimbabwe was going, with the way things were, how people were suffering in a country which was the African breadbasket. To bring it to those particular